Patrick.
All righty. Well, good
There's somebody
afternoon,
up there.
everybody.
Somebody up there.
We are going
Roll
to
the
go
ball,
ahead and
you know?
mute everybody. And we'll ask our presenters if they can unmute themselves. But welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. Last session of the day. Here we are. We hope you had a great day. I know it's been kind of a fun day to see each other again and be in one space, even if it's not in the same physical location. But so grateful for you to hang in there for this last session of our wonderful first day of the Institute. And this is a really, really dynamic presentation. I'm very excited about it. I think it's so important. We've worked with Aztec multiple times over the last 2 years, especially, and prior to the pandemic, but really just appreciate them stepping out. Just a reminder to join us tonight for the Family Feud event. If you are so inclined, we look forward to seeing you all there. Also, remember, if you're only attending today's session, you would complete the sketch form for continuing education, or you can wait until tomorrow if you're attending both days. And with that, I will turn it over to our colleagues from Aztec to present on the integration of digital literacy and adult education programs, Karen Ruiz and Mitch Rosin. You may remember Mitch has presented with us several times and has been a familiar face in our state. And so we're so grateful and glad that they were here today.
Thanks, Patrick. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Just to be clear, we are employees of Aztec, but this is not necessarily an Aztec presentation. For those of you who have seen me present before, I want to bring you information as opposed to sales. So there's nothing sales about this. We want to help you understand digital literacy at a deeper level, and that's what our goal is. So I'm Mitch. It's good to see, well, I can't see any of you because I can only see Patrick. It's the only window open on my screen. But Karen is in an interesting position, and I would like her to explain the multiple roles that she has, because she does bring a very unique perspective to this presentation.
Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Ruiz. I'm currently in California, and I do have an interesting position, or a couple positions. So currently speaking, I am a part-time teacher, ABE GED, but I came from being a full-time teacher pre-pandemic and during the pandemic. And then I loved working from home so much, and I have loved Aztec before, during, and after the pandemic that they hired me, which is kind of cool. So I am the Senior National Academic Specialist for Aztec, but I could not leave my students, having been in the classroom for 20 plus years. So I work evenings also. So I come to you both as, hey, I know Aztec, and also, hey, I use Aztec.
And I'm going to add to her description because she's very modest. She's also on the California Adult Ed Association board, and she is also a national tester for items for the new CASAS math test. So she has got her fingers in a whole bunch of stuff nationally. But anyway, we're going to get started. Maybe, if my computer will let me. And we're sort of grounding this around what's known as the Teaching Skills That Matter digital literacy from MACAE, or some of you may know AFLA, if you are We Owe It To funded. The link is on the screen, and we're going to make this presentation available to Patrick. But all of this comes from the links information about teaching digital literacy. And what we've done is we've woven together what the federal government is putting in their toolkit with what Karen actually does in her classroom. So I'm going to talk about what the toolkit says, and then Karen's going to talk to you about how she implements that toolkit. But to start, because Patrick, who's turned off his camera, so now all I see is him in a suit.
I am here. I'm here.
Funny. So, I want you to think about how society has changed, not only through digital technology adoption, but how we've all changed in the pandemic when it comes to our attachment to our phones. Cell phones have changed what we do. I'm pretty sure that most of you would freak out if you couldn't find your phone for 15 minutes, like if somebody picked it up by mistake. So we have changed the way that we're interacting with technology, with digital literacy, and we also interact with our phones differently. We are on our phones in bed. I mean, I can tell you personally, when I get up in the morning, I clear every email out before I get out of bed. I don't want to deal with it. I want to have it done. I get up and I make my coffee. But we're using our phones at meals, while driving, in church. And every time I say that, somebody says, yes, 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 I have the Bible on my phone. Okay, fine. But we also look at our phones when we're sitting on the toilet, and we all know it, and we just don't admit it. But something else is happening that's critical to understand, and that's the race between technology and education. If you think back to the Industrial Revolution, technology shot up in the late 1800s with the implementation of all sorts of industrial innovations. It took time for education to catch up to that. By the 50s, when the US was a leader in the nuclear race and the 60s going to the moon, education surpassed technology. And what happens between those shifts is social pain. We all felt pain when we locked down at the pandemic and we had to start for the first time teaching online, whether you wanted to or not. That was a pain moment. And technology shot up. If I called any of you 3 years ago and said, hey, you want to Zoom? None of you would probably know what I'm talking about. Maybe you would know Skype. You wouldn't know Zoom. Now it's, oh yeah, you want to do a Zoom in 10 minutes? So we are still, as an education industry, trying to catch up to the technology that has changed us in the last couple of years. And to look at that globally, we have a global population of 7.91 billion. More than half of that are unique cell phone, smartphone users, internet users, and active on social media. Our students are getting information from different places than they used to. How we're engaging with our technology has changed. People get their information from Facebook. They get their information from TikTok. They're not necessarily getting all of their information from us as teachers. So the internet use has dramatically changed, particularly during the pandemic. And social media use has exploded over the last 10 years. People are active, people are engaged in social media, which is really a false platform. And the amount of time that we spend online is different. You may think, oh, I'm not online all that much. Hey, you're online right now. And this is part of the time that we are spending using the internet. We are internet users at this very moment. We are above average in the world. The white line on there is the worldwide average of internet time. We are slightly above it at 7 hours on average a day, particularly in the pandemic. But we are heavily involved in being online in this country. Patrick told me to put some funny things in here, so I'll let you read through this. How many of you do have an iPhone or an Android phone with a broken screen? We don't care. We just need to stay connected. The thought of going into a store and getting that replaced, no, I may lose pictures. Our whole interaction with technology has changed. And yes, there's a lot of bacteria on your phone. Just think of all the places you set it down. And if you look at what happens every 60 seconds in the world, every 60 seconds, think about that. What has happened over the last 2 years of the pandemic. 69 million text messages are sent every minute of every day. 69 million. Think about the numbers on the screen right here. This is crazy, the amount of time that we spend engaged in the internet. But that has also led to a shift in how our students engage. We have different students coming into our programs. We have aspiring academics who are coming out of high school or dropping out of high school who want to get back. We have people coming of age who realize they need upskilling through our CTE programs. We have academic wanderers, older students who need to come back and maybe I want to do something in CT, maybe I want to become a CNA or a licensed vocational nurse or something. We have people coming into adult ed who want to start new careers. And then we have people who are trying to accelerate the careers that they're in. And all of this is being driven by the digital age. So here's the definition of digital literacy that we're going to be using today. And by the way, I hate when people read PowerPoints to me, so I'm going to do my best not to, but I probably will fall into that. Patrick, just kick me under the table if I start reading PowerPoints. So when you look at the federal toolkit coming out of OCTAE, these are the different components, the 5 components that OCTAE is saying we need to include in our curriculum when it comes to digital literacy in the adult ed classroom. So we're going to walk you through these. The first one is basic computer skills. I meet with adult learners in sites all the time who don't know the difference between a keyboard and a mouse, a CPU, a laptop versus a tablet, what the different things are. What is a double click versus a right click? Oh, you right click to open the menu. What's a menu? So there's basic computer skills that we need to be infusing into our classrooms that will allow people to do the things on the right-hand side here. How do you create documents? How do you save them? How do you open things? How do you use URLs in different internet browsers to find the information that you need? The second piece is network literacy. Network literacy relates to how we curate information and engage with each other. How are we connected with each other through technology on a daily basis? I can tell you, I can open TikTok and watch it for 5 hours and not realize that 5 hours has gone by. But we are texting, we are posting, we are looking at Facebook, we are on Twitter, we are on, all of these Instagram accounts. Network literacy allows us to network with other people around the world, not just our own communities. Which leads me to this fascinating fact. Look at how much time we spent every day on just social media as we navigate our way around our cell phones. Total time percentage is insane of what we're doing online. Sure, I'm ordering groceries, but I'm also checking, what the latest dog and cat photos are on Instagram. And these are the apps that our students are using. You look at the number of people using this and the number of hours that are being used. This is where learning is taking place. And here's the global perspective. US is lower than the average. It's about 8 or 9 slots over from the white line, which is the worldwide, but it's still pretty high. So I'm going to turn this over to Karen, and she's going to explain how she actually blends this into her classroom for adult ed and GED.
Okay, so you can just start clicking buttons, Mitch, because it'll populate everything. But this is basically my students' class, or their class's social media network or digital network for school. So if you think about all of the things that Mitch has just talked about with, WhatsApp and TikTok and all of the social media places that they can go, we kind of have our own network of different items that we use in our class. So in addition to printed text, we also have Aztec software, but they need to be familiar with GED.com. They need to use all sorts of different items in order to communicate with me. They need to be able to use Remind, which is a texting app. They need to be able to use email so they can send me things. And then we started just actually beginning of March to boost our attendance scores, requirements for daily check-ins for our distance learning or blended learning class. And so the students either need to come in person to me or then need to Zoom in with me. And so they need to be really familiar with all of these pieces. And I do have a student right now who's actually a former student of mine from 6 years ago, who's now in my class. And it has taken us a full week. We are on today is Thursday. So this is our 6th class meeting, 6 class meetings to figure out how to get her on Zoom, because we had to get a new email address, and then she couldn't get the email address accessed on her phone, and she couldn't get access to Zoom on her phone because her husband has the passcode and she doesn't have the passcode for her phone to add new apps to her phone. Last night was trying to get her on Zoom, and it took a phone, an iPad, an older child, a Chromebook, and myself, and messages held up in front of the camera because we could not get everything to work. We couldn't get the mic working. We got the camera finally working. We couldn't figure out where to navigate. So all of that is that digital literacy that Mitch has been talking about.
The next part of the federal toolkit deals with digital problem solving. And there is a big difference between asking Siri where the local Starbucks is and getting Google Map directions and actual doing problem solving. And this is where what's known as problem solving in technology-rich environments comes in. And that environment should be underlined. Whoops. Being able to use information online in your daily life, contextualized to solve issues that you, your family, your network are having, is critical. And that really comes back to being able to ask questions, make meaning out of the information that you're finding, and then using that experience to create your future activities. And we've got to explicitly be telling our students that the stuff that's online may or may not be true. You can find anything online to support your beliefs. We need to start teaching them how to be diligent about what information should be used. So to that, Take a look at how weekly purchases have changed. We are buying things online now that we never used to. We're ordering groceries in the pandemic. We're doing DoorDash, Grubhub, Seamless. We're doing Uber Eats. Our shift to online purchasing has changed because we have been engaged in digital problem solving. It was not safe to go to stores. So we have shifted to doing our purchasing online for almost everything. Grocery purchases are massive right now. People do not want to be in the grocery store. I know it's changing, but look at the shifts that have happened. And then consumer goods have changed too. People are buying online like they never have. You know, I used to go to a store to buy shirts. I don't do that anymore. I buy them online. So the way that we're interacting with digital knowledge has changed. And then of course, what we're doing for e-commerce, billions, trillions of dollars is driving this and changing the way our students engage, especially when it comes to travel and tourism. So again, Karen, why don't you share with us what you're doing?
So like you were saying before, you know, it's not just having somebody tell them this is what you're going to do. And so in my classroom, the way we look at working online is a little bit different also. So a lot of my students, and I'm sure a lot of your ABE and ASC students, are coming into school having not been successful in a K-12 traditional setting. And so we're looking at a different mindset for learning. They're not going to be content completers. They're not going to go through Aztec and just go through and make sure they do all the work, or take a book out and just make sure they do all the work. GED.com with their GED practice tests are going to identify skills that the students then need to work on. So it's important for my students to really get that in their mindset, that this is what they need to be doing. They need to be thinking as problem solvers and not as content completers. Mitch, you can go ahead and click and we'll fill in that box. So my students have a work checklist. They're going to, with me, identify areas of proficiency and areas of need. And then I'm going to be a big old cheerleader and super celebrate any areas that get to be bypassed, because those are areas of proficiency. And we're going to focus on those areas of need. Again, we're not just going to complete all of the content. We're going to problem solve. I'm going to problem solve as the teacher and figure out what content does each student need to complete. Go ahead and click again for me. So the focus of their work is going to be on the how to. How do I do this? What are the skills I need to complete this activity or answer these questions? The how to, and then also the facts. There, of course, there's some facts that they need to know as well, but a lot of that too is usable vocabulary rather than retain and spit out vocabulary. We are not focused on the answers. And so I do have some of my students, and they are a lot of my youngsters that are coming out of that traditional setting that are frantically trying to find the answers and find the shortcuts and how can I get the right grade on this drill so that I can just move forward. It's not about getting the right answer. It's about, do you understand how to get the right answer? And so memorizing, you know, the test question answer key of CDBAC isn't going to help them for a number of reasons. One, because they're not learning any skills, and two, because Aztec mixes all the questions up. So if they do it again, it's not in the same order. So click one more time for me, please. So we're looking at everyday literacies, which is a term I think I made up. We're looking at the students to ask questions. They need to make meaning. They need to draw on their experience and use that experience, including that technology, to support future activities. Okay. So just as kind of a sample of what this looks like in Aztec, I can go in my classes for my students, and instead of showing them everything, go ahead and click again. I can actually adjust their learning view. Click one more time so that they only see the stuff I want them to work on. So for an example, this student here just needs to work on these two sections. They were identified on the GED.com ready practice test. These are the two items or two sections that the student needs to work on. We'll go post-test, and then they can move on their way. So again, they're not completing all of the content. We did a little problem solving. We figured out exactly what they need to work on. They're going to get those skills, and then we're going to go and assess again. Okay, thanks.
And that leads me into Piac. I don't know if all of you are familiar. Patrick, is that something that MACAE uses, talks about, discusses?
We have shared this information, yep, but we haven't, I think you're going to use it in a much more holistic way than we have introduced it, perhaps.
Sure. So Piac is the International Assessment of Adult Ed, specifically adult education skills. And for those of you who are members of COABE, I wrote an article with some of my colleagues for the COABE Journal a couple of years ago, specifically looking at technology innovation and how that impacts adult education career pathways. So the Piac study was first given in 2012. I know that's 10 years ago. It has been, there have been updates given since, but I think it's important to note that it really took a look at literacy, numeracy, and problem solving globally for adult ed learners. And one of the things that it identified was PSTRE, which is problem solving in technology-rich environments. And what it found was, aside from the fact that 1 in 6 US adults had low literacy skills and 1 in 3 struggled with numeracy, it found that the average US adult learner in adult education had lower scores than almost all the other countries around the world when it came to using technology to solve daily problems. And side note that isn't even on a slide here, one of the problems that the study identified was that adults couldn't even take the online survey. They needed a paper survey to participate in the Piac research. So PSTRE is really the use of digital technology, communication tools, and networks, the same thing that we just talked about from the federal toolkit, and using those as tools to evaluate information, communicate with family, friends, community, faith-based partners, et cetera, and then to perform actual tasks that you need in your daily life. So in terms of what is PSTRE, there's really 5 areas that are involved with full PSTRE, knowledge and skills. And that's judgment and decision making, complex problem solving, not Googling Siri for where Starbucks is, but how do I find the best home mortgage? How do I apply for, SNAP or TANF online? How do I learn from that experience to apply for another program that's going to benefit me and my family? And then, of course, the reading comprehension and the critical thinking skills that are necessary to function in a digital environment. So the goals of doing direct PSTRE instruction are really focusing on becoming proficient in problem solving, not technology. Technology is the tool that leads you to problem solving. So when you think about how this happens every day in the adult ed classroom, we need to be explicitly teaching our students how to use the tools that they have. How can a computer help you achieve your goals academically, from a career perspective, and from your community involvement? How can the tools available to you be something that you employ daily looking forward in your life? How can you tap into more resources with the technology? And that instruction needs to be explicit and both implicit in terms of linking it into the contextual daily activities that we're trying to get our adult learners to master. So 70% of adults had low PSTRE skills, which is shocking compared to where millennials fall on that. And we know that there is a direct correlation between proficiency of skills and the ability to find and become employable at family sustaining wages. So infusing the techniques that Karen is talking about into your daily instruction is critical to get the adults that we work with into the labor market and to be successful in their career pathways. All right, that's PSTRE. So going on to information literacy. Information literacy is the next piece of the federal toolkit, and it's really the ability to find, evaluate, and use the stuff that shows up on the internet, on your phones, on your tablets, on your PCs, on your laptops. How do we actually take what's out there visually, culturally, and use it to make decisions in our daily lives? How do we take that information and become literate in the interpretation of that information? If I Google aliens, I can find an article that aliens landed in, I'm in Manhattan today, there's the Trade Center. How do I find an article that says aliens landed in Times Square last night and zapped up all of the Mickey Mouse characters? Does that matter? How do I use the information that's floating out there on the internet to become a literate participant in the digital world? Look at how many people use social media just to do brand research. When they're looking at whether they should come back into adult education, people are looking at TikTok and Instagram to decide whether they should go enroll in a GED program. This is where people are getting information. Karen, how do you deal with this?
So what we talked about before, when we talked about my students focusing on the how-to and the facts and not just the answers, additionally, what I have them do, and you can click again for me, is they need to look not only at the question, but they also need to look at the answer description. So the same thing that Mitch was talking about where, hey, the information is going to be given to you. What are you going to do with it? So if we go to the next slide, you can see on the next slide, here's an example of one of our questions, and it shows that, our students need to know how to locate, evaluate, and use effectively not only the needed information, but also the information that's given. And so one of the things I really like about Aztec is that not only do they get immediate feedback like, hey, your answer is correct, or hey, your answer isn't correct. Go ahead and flip to the next, or it'll move. There we go. They're also going to get an explanation. And so I teach my students, like, this is the most valuable thing. You are basically getting a cheat sheet from the system in regards to the answers to these questions, because they're going to tell you how to get the right answer. And they might give you additional information that you didn't know before. They might show you a different way to get through a math problem. Or as I tell them a lot of times, like for me, I'll get the right answer. And then for all of the wrong reasons I've gotten the right answers, probably pure luck. And so it actually informs me like, oh, you got the right answer because you should have been thinking about it this way. So again, it goes back to what you were saying before about they really need to take that information and kind of work it, evaluate it, make sure that they truly understand it and glean as much as they can off of it. And so that is something that I have my students do anytime they're posed with an answer. I tell them those are little coins of gold, not to bring in the St. Patrick's Day themes here. And they need to take every single one of them and put them in their toolbox, in their notes, and use them.
The next piece of the federal toolkit is media literacy. How do we evaluate the media that we find online, be it videos, Snapchats, TikToks? How do we not just interpret, evaluate, use, and communicate with the media that we're seeing, but also how do we create our own? So many of our students are creating their own original content. They're stitching with TikToks. They're doing other things and being content generators. Hate to say it, but content creators. They may not think of themselves that way, but they're taking in the information that they're seeing, the different media that's coming in, and creating their own as outputs. And that goes to the world's most used social media platforms: Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp. I live on WhatsApp. I've been a WhatsApp devotee for 10 years. I think it's one of the best things that's ever happened. For those of you who don't use it, get it. I hate to say that, but I mean, you can transfer video files, PDFs, Word documents, voice texts. I have WhatsApp on my computer so that I can function as a business working on my computer with the WhatsApp web. But look at all of the different ones down at the bottom of the list. I promise you that you may not have heard of all of them. These are the platforms used around the world. If you're working with immigrant populations, you need to know what platforms they're using. Weibo is massive in China, massive. You need to know what your immigrant populations are using as part of their social media presence. And you also need to know where they're going with their downloads. So when you take a look at where the downloads are coming from, on the left, Meta, which is the new name of Facebook's parent company, Meta owns Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, and Facebook Messenger. The data being collected is important that we understand. Who is getting our data and storing our data? How do we teach internet safety? How do we teach online safety? How much stuff is out there about our personal lives that we may or may not want these companies to have? And then, of course, we're buying things through these streaming platforms. We're buying movies, music, we're downloading apps and games. We're studying, we're doing ebooks now, EPUBs. People are downloading things to read on their phones. It's no longer on your Kindle or your Nook. You can download EPUBs onto your phones.
So in my classroom, this would look like, let's go find an appropriate source for whatever article we're doing. And it might tie to an Aztec activity, or it might tie to an activity that we're using out of one of our Steck Von books, especially for my students that are at that high GED level and are prepping to take those tests and are getting familiar with those real world resources. What is an appropriate news article? Where is an appropriate place to find appropriate news articles? What are journal articles and how are they different than news articles? And so we kind of embed that in our class. And so it's part of the activities, and it's kind of a twofer. My students are getting to see real world examples that actually do exist on the internet. And hopefully that will also kind of steer them towards those sources when they're looking for that information about Disney characters being zapped by aliens in Manhattan.
So let's talk a little bit about why digital literacy is important. I think you're sort of getting the gist of where we're going with this, but let's be a little bit more explicit. It is a critical component to adult basic ed. We are teaching the skills necessary for our learners to move forward in both their academic and career pathways. We need to use technology and digital literacy to support those goals. It is almost impossible these days to participate fully in society without having a knowledge and a working understanding of technology and how the digital world works. So we need to be teaching both the foundational computer skills. What is a mouse? What is a keyboard? What keys do I touch to make things happen on my computer? And leveraging those skills to support the learning that our students are doing. Yes, you have to write an essay for the HiSET test. Yes, you have extended response items on the GED, but can we be using a Google Doc where 3 or 4 students are working and editing on the same paragraph or essay at the same time to achieve that goal? So we're teaching the reading, the writing, the grammar, the usage, everything else, while embedding using a Google Doc as the tool to get there. We also need to know that foundational skills are critical for employment. Too many people struggle with the skills needed to get a job. It says there that the National Skills Coalition found that 73% of workers lacked digital problem solving. That goes back to PSTRE. But we also know that in order to be family sustainable wage earning, you need to be in that middle skill job category. You need to be making an hourly wage or higher above the poverty line in your zip code in order to hit that benchmark. But we know also that in that middle skill job category that does not require a bachelor's degree, people are lacking the digital mastery that they need to perform the job functions. So we need to be embedding those skills and that learning in our adult ed programs along the way so that we're getting our learners into that next step of income earning potential. It's also important to know that not everybody has the internet. Many of our adult ed students don't have the funds to pay for data at home, don't have the funds to pay for unlimited bandwidth. And that the places where they come to see us, our schools, our libraries, our community organizations that are offering adult education services, may be the only place where they can actually access the internet. So we need to be open to the idea that, yes, we want our students online and learning and engaged in the learning process, but they may need to use our facilities for other reasons as well. They may need to do their SNAP and TANF applications with us. They may need to apply for who knows what, bus passes, whatever they need, and that we may be the only resource that they have for getting access to those services, which are now only available online. There is still a full 10% of America that is in a location where internet has not arrived yet. That is a huge amount of the population when you think about it. And finally, this is all part of the CCRS. We have to be doing this. If you are WIOA funded, if you are using Tabor Casas for your assessments, if you are pushing people for GED or HiSET or any type of career certification, this is 21st century skills that are embedded in the college and career readiness standards. We need to be teaching these skills explicitly. They're not only in our required standards, but they're required for full participation in society. All right, how are we doing on time? How are we doing on slide number? I can't see that when I'm doing this.
We have about 20 minutes, not quite 20 minutes.
All right, so let's get into the nitty gritty. How does Karen actually build the skills that matter? So we're going to do the same back and forth and walk through what you need to do in your classrooms. So we already know that adult ed programs are the ideal place to get these skills into people's hands. We have the technology. We can do this. We can support literacy, digital literacy development as we teach the content that our learners need. We can do this in ABE, ASC, HSD, HSE, ESL, CTE, name anything. You can embed digital learning into your curriculum. So the first thing that needs to be embedded is critical thinking. People need to know how to think. People need to be able to evaluate. They need to be able to understand reliability and validity of information that's available in the digital world. We need to be able to say, you know what, I know that this is online, but I don't believe it. It's not true. It's not supported by science. It's not supported by fact. We need to explicitly teach our learners how to do these things.
So in my class, and you can kind of click through those as we go, they do need to be critical thinkers. And so everything that we do kind of nurtures that critical thinking strength. So they need to take notes, but they need to do them in their own words, because if you're doing it in your own words, then they're understanding, hopefully, what they're writing. I tell my students all the time, I can read in Spanish. I can read exactly what's being said, and I can write it out. I have no idea what I'm saying. I have no idea what I'm writing. I just happen to know the grammar and the syntax and the phonemes. So I can do that part of it. You have to be able to understand what you're reading. That's part of that critical thinking piece. So as they're writing and they're evaluating, they're paying attention to those explanations and looking at the answers that have been shared with them. And their main goal is to make sure that they're focused on the learning. And so that's like the big piece at the end, is our focus is you learning the skills. What they might perceive is just the GED skills. You as a great educator are going to embed in those great academic skills all of those digital tech skills as well.
The next skill is communication. Communication is relevant in every single job. Doesn't matter what you do or where you work. You have to be able to express yourself. You have to be able to express yourself in different contexts. How I speak in this webinar is not the way I speak to my 95-year-old mother with dementia. How I speak to her is not the way I speak to the clients that I work with in adult ed programs in California. You have to be able to adapt your communication style, and you have to be able to do it verbally and in writing. And writing can come in the form of Word documents, PowerPoints, even spreadsheets. You know, in my work as a consultant, I oftentimes have to submit a spreadsheet of information. How I decide what goes in there is part of my communication style. So we need to be embedding these skills into our students. How do you use the tools that are used in the work world? How do you use online platforms? How do you apply for a job online? How do you write a resume or a cover letter and attach it into an online job application? That has to be an explicit part of what we're doing in the classroom.
So in my classroom, what I try to do is I try to model what that communication is supposed to look like, because my students are communicating with me through Remind, which is a text, through email, and then in our class meetings, either over Zoom or in person. And so they need to know, like, what is an appropriate email format? I've had so many students who have sent me emails where the entire message is in the subject area. And so it's like 14, sentences on, I'm not going to be at school today because my son is sick because we think we might have COVID, but we're not really sure. But he sat next to that one girl and she went home for 2 weeks, blah, 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 blah. And it's all in the subject area, in the heading, and not actually in the format. They need to know that they're supposed to contact me if they're going to be absent. And I do the same thing, actually, much to the chagrin of my admin, who say, don't let them know you're not coming because they won't continue working. No, I'm going to be responsible and model for them that they need to let somebody know if they're not going to be there, if they're expected to be there. One other thing that we always touch on and have to touch on at least once a month or so with a new student is my email address appropriate? And if it's not, let me help you get a new one. In regards to Aztec, there's some additional things as well that can be used. We have tools that may allow you to make announcements or lecture, that allows you to present to your students in a specific way so they can see the language used appropriately, they can read it appropriately. I try to use the word there all the time and you're all the time when I'm texting with the students, and I spell it correctly, and I go back and check and make sure everything's capitalized correctly, my punctuation's correct, but I have ending punctuation. They get to see the YOU apostrophe RE a lot with me, and they also get to see a lot spelled correctly. So they get to see what it's supposed to look like.
And I want to thank Angela for her comment about not upgrading her iPhone with a smashed screen. I actually have a smashed screen protector on mine, and I'm afraid to change the screen protector because they don't always stick. So I've got a smashed screen protector, and I won't even change that. Next skill, processing and analyzing information. And this comes back to sort of a recurrent theme that we've been talking about. We need to teach how to consciously make decisions about what we see online. We are in a very polarized political climate. We are dealing with Russian invasion of Ukraine. We are dealing with a whole bunch of things online that have permeated our society. We need to teach people how to lean into their own values and process and analyze the information that they're being presented. Like I said, I can find something online that says aliens stole the Mickey Mouse costume folks down in Times Square. I'm about a 15-minute walk from Times Square right now. We've got to be able to understand and consciously decide what is real, what is not real, and how we're going to use that information for our own purposes.
So thinking about that in terms of the GED, which is what I teach, the essay section of the Aztec GED is a great way for students to be introduced to identifying the author's bias. Because if you know anything about the GED extended response, they're asked to look at 2 different resource materials or 2 different opinions, and then not create an essay that it explicitly utilizes their own bias, but rather evaluates the 2 essays as to which one is written better and has better supportive materials. In the essay writing portion of the Aztec GED class, you can see that we cover all of the different components of writing. But Mitch, if you'll click through to our actual essay piece, it should come up. You can see that the students are explicitly told, like, this is not about your opinion, this is not about what you think, and that all kind of lends itself to a great conversation about author's bias. Now you as the author cannot show your bias, you're going to be looking at the facts. And what does that look like in an article or an essay or something that you see online? Can you then identify a different author's bias? So it's a great skill for them to have, not just to pass another essay.
So the other thing is self-awareness. Our students need to know where they reside personally within the learning community, within the employment community. They have to understand their own competencies. They have to understand their own knowledge of technology. I mean, I will admit that I am, despite working for a software company and doing Zooms, I am a Luddite. There is not a chance that I could ever figure out how to set up my router or anything in my apartment. I don't get it. I have other people do it for me, but we need to be able to acknowledge that. I know when I need help. Our students need to know that too. They need to know when they have to seek out support. They have to know how to monitor their own knowledge of the internet and how to navigate the internet. And part of that might be having a checklist for students that they can use to keep track of their own self-awareness. But we need to teach that to students. They need to know what skills they need to learn in addition to the skills that they've mastered.
So I just spoke with an instructor recently who said, you know, my students really wish that they didn't have to go up to the tab that says activity scores to go and review the score for the drill they just did. And I said, the importance of that is that it's teaching the students to self-monitor their progress. Because when they go up and they look at that activity score, and then Mitch, you can kind of start clicking through here, not only are they looking at the score for their most recent and current activity, you can go ahead and click again, but they're also looking at this one more time, scores for all of the other times that they took that assessment. So they're looking at that historical data so they can see all of their progress. Click one more time, and all of their scores, so then they can evaluate their own progress. And once I explained it to that instructor, he said, oh, well, that does kind of make sense. I said, because it's important that our students are self-monitoring. They're in charge of their learning, and they're in charge of looking at their outcomes and also speaking up and saying, hey, I think I need to slow down a little bit more. I think I need your assistance. Or, hey, I noticed I didn't do well on this and I took it 6 times. What do I do next? So speaking up for themselves as well and advocating for themselves.
Next skill is problem solving. We've talked a lot about that. We need to be focusing on open-ended problem solving as opposed to guided problem solving. We need to be identifying issues that are relevant to them in their community and their lives, so that they can actually contextualize it to themselves. You know, we know if you get geeky on Malcolm Knowles's assumptions of adult learners and the theory of andragogy, you know, we learn the best when the content that we're learning is relevant to our own lives. And having them do open-ended problem-solving activities that relate to what they're facing at home, at work, allows them to actually incorporate that learning. To geek out even more, you know, our goal is to get people to move from short-term memory, you know, things that you will remember in the next 5-10 minutes, to long-term working memory through chunking of information and incorporating skills into our existing skill base, so that we're building on what we can do.
So I really love that, you know, Aztec gives me a way to be able to bring in conversations and have conversations with my students, because they have the means and the reports for us to have those deep conversations. But Mitch, as you kind of slowly click through these, what I also really love about the questions that Aztec provides for our students is that, you know, they have all of those different GED and HiSET question types in all of their practice, so that they're very used to that. And I've had a number of students who have done exceptionally well on the GED practice test and just want to get in there and get some practice because they want to become familiar with the technology, familiar with the question types. So I really appreciate that that is available to them.
The next skill is being able to navigate systems. We need to be able to figure our way around the internet. Where do we go to find stuff? And how do we use it once we get there? Obviously, the biggest search engine in the world is Google. There are others. How do we identify these? How do we find the media and the tools that we need to make decisions? How do we embed that into each of our subject areas? If you're teaching a reading language arts class or a math or science, social studies, writing, how do we contextualize that so that people are actually learning the tools as well as the skills that they need to navigate the systems in the internet?
So thinking about those learning systems, I have this that I made for my students so that they can kind of learn how to follow the steps and get through the program in the most efficient way. And it really is, for a lot of the students, the very first time they've ever navigated through anything that is not social media related. So a lot of the social media things, everything is right there. They don't have to go look for somebody or search for something. You know, TikTok is a forever, never ending stream of videos. You just kind of swipe through them. This is something a little bit more complicated and convoluted for some of them, especially if they're new. So we take those baby steps for them to kind of learn how to navigate through the program. And it really does build their confidence so that they're able to look outside of what's right in front of them on the screen for more information.
So how to teach all of this? We need to support foundational skills. Karen, how many slides do we have left? I'm trying to keep an eye on the clock.
We have about 20.
Okay, I'm going to go fast then because we have 9 minutes. We need to support foundational skills. What is a computer? What are the parts? How do they work? And what do we need them for?
So when I look at this with my students, and I got one I'm working with now, it's patience, it's small steps, it's short-term goals, baby steps through those short-term goals. It's the students writing their own step-by-step checklist rather than you giving them a list, because if they put it in their own words, they're going to understand it better.
We need to explicitly teach the vocabulary of computers. We need to be using the words, have them keep a journal, have them keep a list, have them keep a diary of the terms that are used in the digital literacy environment.
So I'll give you a very quick story in this. I had a student who was doing the GED Ready practice test from home. So they had to go to print, but they had to save it as a PDF, and then they had to attach that PDF to me as an email. All of those things were new to that student, but the next week when the student was in class and they were all talking about the new AT&T $10 internet, that student was going around to help all of the other students. Here, you're going to take a picture of your ID and then you're going to upload it to the website because you've saved it, and then you're going to save it as a PDF and then send yourself a copy. Same thing. Schoolwork, life work.
We need to integrate technology in and out of class. They need to be using the technology that they have. They may not have it at home, but they can come in and use the technology that we provide them.
Just click through all of that and look, holy smokes, look at all of the tech. This is all the tech that's provided for my students. They learn how to use all of that in our classes.
We need to emphasize access. We need to be open to letting students use the technology that our schools provide. We need to be open to providing Wi-Fi hotspots, telling them where Wi-Fi hotspots are. You know, I don't know what the situation is in Michigan. Maybe Patrick can chime in. You know, I put a final example on there called Rachel, which in California is remote access community hotspots for education and learning. It essentially is a MiFi device that downloads online content and allows students to use it in areas where there is no internet access. We have to be cognizant that data plans are a financial barrier to our students for working at home, especially if they have multiple children online doing their learning and they're trying to get access as well.
So, oh, that's mine. I forgot I put pictures in there. So digital access on my site looks like an array of different things. So it could be our classes are situated differently. So our ABE GED classroom does not look like a classroom. It actually looks more kind of like a library or a cafe without the food. Our students are using technology to come into class. So that one in the corner, that's me, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from 6 to 8. I am glued to a Zoom and I have students coming up to me at the same time. Our students are working in a variety of different ways, and we need to keep that in mind. Go ahead and click to the next one. This is this. Ooh. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Previous slide. We need to keep that in mind when we look at that tech, because not only do our students need to be tech savvy, our teachers need to be tech savvy too. So there are apps out there in addition to Remind. We look at Google Voice, we look at quizzes and Quizlet and all of those other things that can be utilized. Our teachers also need to know those, and as administrators, we need to provide them support so they can learn them.
Use relevant technologies. Find out what the employers in your town who are trying to hire your students use in the workplace. Pick up the phone and call people. I cannot tell you how many times I talk to adult ed administrators who have never talked to the 5 largest employers in their community. Find out the technology that's needed and help your students master the skills needed to get those jobs. The second part of that is use the stuff that your students walk into class with. If they walk in with an Android smartphone, help them to use that as an educational tool and a career pathway tool.
There's my piece. That was my piece on the teachers. Teachers need to know all of this, and then some. And again, whatever your students are using. I will admit I'm an Android user and I have no idea how to use an iPhone. And everything scares me. iPhone, iPad, iTablet, iMac, whatever. Don't understand any of it. I should actually get in there and use it a little more because there's no control key.
So what are basic best practices? Begin with direct instruction. Let them practice the skills that you're instructing. Use the vocabulary and draw in those contexts from outside the classroom that they need for jobs and community engagement and faith-based engagement into your classroom. Use that vocabulary. I know I keep saying this over and over again. They've got to become familiar with it. Android, what's an Android, right? They need to know these words. They need to know the words that your employers in your communities use on a daily basis. Log in and clock your hours. Log into what? What does that mean to log in? Where do you log in from? How do you log in? Infuse that vocabulary. Give them ample time for self-directed work. They have to be able to demonstrate the skills that you are both directly and implicitly teaching them. Meet them where they are. Everybody comes to class with a different level of skill. Everybody uses technology somewhere. You've got to be able to tap into their level and meet them where they are in their learning process with technology. A great free assessment is the North Star Digital Literacy Assessment. I put the URL on here. Students can go on and take the assessment. It's free, and it'll help them to understand where they are and help you understand where you need to meet them. With that being said, we are chained to our phones. We are chained to our phones. I think I've had every one of those phones in that picture. Although the old dial phone, I think, would have been a princess phone in the 1980s. But we are relying on this to stay connected to the world. We need to tap into what our students are walking in with and teach them how to use that to be a tool in their toolkit. So since Patrick keeps saying for me to include funny things on here, Patrick, this is for you. I found this fascinating because this is the amount of web searches that are done every day for dogs versus cats. It's interesting that there are more web pages about cats, but more web searches about dogs. So if you're looking to tap into an untapped market, you may want to take a look about websites for dogs. Patrick, does that hit the mark for you?
I agree. Dogs always dogs over cats.
So with that said, I think we have, what, 2 minutes? Are there questions that we can field, Patrick? I haven't opened the chat box.
There are quite a few. So let me look here.
I saw great comments.
Yes. And Karen, if you see any, you can snag them too.
Yeah, I think I've only seen great comments, which I've tried to late in the game respond to.
Any other questions now as we are wrapping up?
All right, well, I hope this was useful for everybody. I put the URLs at the bottom of each slide. Patrick, I'll send you the PowerPoint so you can share it with everybody.
Sounds great.
Again, we create these PowerPoints for you. They are for your use. We don't need them. I already know what's on the PowerPoint, so they are for you.
Well, you both are getting much kudos. We are going to probably snag you back again to do something maybe towards the end of this year. I'm going to try to book you, Mitch. So I'll have to check your calendar and see if you're available, but we'd love to have you come back and do like a second phase of this too. I think it's just really that important, and just really appreciate you both taking the time. Lots of kudos in the chat, and I can send those to you both as well for some positive affirmations there. But any other final questions before we sign off? All right. Well, thank you both so much. Really appreciate you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. Remember, virtual family feud tonight. Join us, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Have a good one. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Be safe.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great rest of your conference. Bye guys.
Have a good one.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Mitch and Karen. Have a good one.
Bye.